What's up, guys? I want to hop on today to talk about a topic many of us lifters have dealt with, and that is shoulder pain from benching. Now, how many times have you gotten done benching or doing like push-ups or something similar and felt that nasty ache right here in the front of your shoulder? You can put both my arms up for that one because I can't tell you how many times I've dealt with that. So if you feel like your only option though is to completely ditch those exercises altogether, stick with me because I'm going to show you why it's happening and then how you can get it to go away for good so you can go back to hitting those big old weights. Before we dive in, I did want to mention that you guys can get the full system to relieve shoulder pain and increase flexibility inside the Healthy Shoulder 10-Day Challenge. It's packed with daily mobility exercises, a 3-week Kickstarter plan so you know what to do after the challenge, and so much more. Now we start on October 26th, so sign up at healthy-shoulders.com to get in on the fun. And let me just say, you guys are getting an awesome program for less than the cost of a class at your favorite yoga studio, so don't miss this. Alright, so first up, let's get into why does bench pressing cause shoulder pain? Now, the easy answer is it's a lack of internal and external rotation of the shoulder as well as a little bit of shoulder extension. So what are those complicated terms? So internal rotation is if you hold your arm out in front of you, you look at that inner elbow and you turn him in. External is if you turn that elbow out. And extension is if you take your arm behind you. So those are kind of the big three that you have to have in order to bench. If you don't have those, then we're going to have issues. Now, why are those guys important? So if I'm in a bench press and I'm here, for instance, right now, if I lock everything in, I'm in what we call external rotation. As I descend, my shoulder, even though you can barely tell, it goes into internal rotation the deeper I go. And then now we're in that extension piece. Now, if I lack any of those three, more specifically, especially that internal and external, we're going to have some really big issues when benching. So you just got to make sure you have those ranges, because if you don't have it, kind of think of them almost like prerequisites, right? If you don't have the prerequisites to do that, some problems are going to start to happen. All right, so now, what's the first thing we try and do to avoid shoulder pain while benching? Because you know we got to still get our bench in, our push-ups in, heck, even dips you can probably throw into this category. Well, the first thing you start doing is you start cutting your range, right? We've all been there. So instead of coming all the way down and touching your chest, because when you get here, you're like, oh, that pinches, it burns, it stings, it aches, whatever the symptom is. All right, so if instead of stopping here, I stop like 2 inches off my chest. Sounds good, right? I'm just cutting my range of motion, but I'm still getting my bench pressing in. So I cut that down a little bit, and then a couple weeks later, oh man, now even being 2 inches off starts to happen. And then you go to 4 inches off your chest. We've all been there, right? And then that eventually a couple weeks later, now that starts to ache a little bit. Then you go to like 6 inches. And now you're that person at the gym just doing this on the bench press bar, who we all make fun of, right? You don't want to be that person. So then what do? Now you've run out of options with the flat bench. Now you start grabbing dumbbells. So we start out, dumbbells feel pretty good, because they're not locked in with that grip, so it requires a little bit less range of motion in your shoulders. So now you start doing your dumbbell presses like this. That's good. Then once again, another week or two passes by, and now you're starting to cut it a little bit shorter, and then so forth, and it keeps going. And then now you can't do flat bench anymore with a barbell, and you can't do dumbbell presses. So then what's the next option? If you're lucky, you have one of those multi-grip football bars that allows you to kind of hold your hands like this, because this requires a little bit less rotation, because you're not in this grip, you're in this grip. Once again, you touch your chest, you're like, oh, everything's great, I can still go all the way down, get my full range of motion bench, and then now you got to start cutting it 2 inches, 4 inches, and so forth, until one day you are out of options. Now, that sucks. It's not fun to be out of options when you press, because we love to horizontal press. So now you're probably asking, well, what am I supposed to do then if I run out? So the whole thing is why adjusting your technique isn't going to cut it. And the reason why is that every time you start cutting your range of motion down, you're not using all the stuff that your shoulder can have. What I mean by that is like if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you stop expressing shoulder range of motion, you start to lose that. And then now you're going to be pressing here, and then you're going to lose from here to here. Now you're going to start pressing from here to here. So every time you actually change your technique, you're making your shoulder worse. Now I'm going to repeat that again. Every time you change your technique to make it a little less stressful on the shoulder, you're actually making your shoulder worse. Let that sink in there for a minute, because that was the biggest aha moment for me, as I realized, like, okay, I'm running out of options. It's getting worse and worse and worse. Then what am I supposed to do? Well, that's why you guys are here, right? That's why we're watching this video. So the key is that you have to start working on your shoulder mobility while you're using those bench press or push-up alternatives. So while you're, let's say this no longer works and now you're like halfway down, well, you can keep pressing from there, but now you start doing some shoulder mobility stuff, which is what we do here at Pippin Performance. And while you're doing that stuff in the background, so you're always working on your shoulder mobility, you keep using whatever is pain-free, and then eventually, after a couple weeks, you can get back to a little bit lower, and a little bit lower, and a little bit lower. But only if you're doing your shoulder mobility in the background, and that's the way it works. Because if you don't do that, you're going to end up one of those people who start making like pillow forts to go to sleep. Like, have you ever seen those commercials? It's like a pillow you slide your arm under, and then you can rest this guy here. Is because their shoulder is just, it's gone now. Because they just kept reducing their technique, changing their range of motion until their shoulder just went kaboom. And so now they can't even sleep. So you don't want to turn into that. So what we're going to do today is I'm actually going to show you guys a simple little drill that I like to do in between sets of benching with my clients, or even push-ups, or whatever the press is. And this way, instead of sitting there being on your phone in between sets, which we've all been guilty of, this is something you can do in between sets to work on your shoulders to make your benching just even more effective, and that way you can continue to do it pain-free. So the only equipment you're going to need is a hand towel. So this is very, very small. You could use a rope as well. Technically, you don't need the towel, but it does add a little bit extra, so I would highly recommend it. So what you're going to do is, first off, don't cause any pain or pinching while you do this. That should be rule number one for anything you do with your human body. 2, don't go crazy here. Try to be like 50%, maybe even 40%, like in terms of intensity and effort. Less is best, especially with your shoulders. Now, if we were talking hips, we can you can get after it a little bit with your hips, but with your shoulders, you got to be a little bit more sensitive. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I'm going to back up for you guys. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take the towel, you're going to put it behind your back, and you see what I've done. I've grabbed the towel, and I'm just kind of resting here on my lower back. Now, if you're a little less flexible and that's not very comfortable, you would just have your hands resting on kind of like the top of your butt cheeks, or even right down here in the middle. The key is you want your arm behind you, and then you're grabbing the towel and just kind of holding onto it, and you're just sitting here comfortably. So we call this a passive stretch because there's not any intensity or any like contractions or anything. We're just relaxing. So you would just sit here just for about 10-15 seconds and just kind of sink into that stretch. Now what you should be feeling is kind of like a nice stretch here in the front of the pec and the shoulder, and then maybe a smidge across the outside of the cuff. Make sure you feel that. If you don't feel that, and you don't feel any pain or anything, to increase the stretch, you would just go up a little bit higher, okay? What I don't want to see is the chicken wing here. So once you find a spot, try to keep your elbow relatively the same, and don't let it change throughout the drill. The second thing you got to think about is, where are your scaps? So you see how that's in shrug life and this is depressed? Just try to make him down and maybe a smidge back. You don't want to be up here kind of in hunchback. You want to be kind of down here a little bit. So once we've sat here for about 15 seconds, now we're going to go into the contractions. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to try to pull the towel apart. So it's like you're trying to rip the towel open, remember, nice and easy. And when you first do that, you'll feel just this nice little contraction sensation right here in the top of the shoulder. So that's part one. Now, while pulling apart, part two is you're trying to rotate your wrist. You're not trying to forearm shiver somebody. You're trying to rotate into the lower back. So I'm pulling apart and I'm pushing into my lower back. And when you do that, you'll feel this nice contraction here and across the cuff. Let's do that for 10, 9, 8. Remember, we're nice and easy. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. You're going to relax, and now you're going to try to crush your knuckles together, and you'll feel like some tissue in between your scaps and your mid-back contract, and now you're trying just to lift off your lower back. You see that rotation movement? It's not this, it's that. So my elbows stay still, and now you might get a little gap in there. As long as you're getting like at least a paper width in between your hands and your lower back, you're doing great. And you're pushing those knuckles together. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and relax. And then you would just kind of sink back into the stretch for like another 20-30 seconds. And then you would slowly come out of that, rotate your shoulders a little bit, kind of to bring it back to life. And then you would go back to your bench press. So to kind of recap that, towel, hands behind the back, you try to pull the towel apart and rotate into your lower back. So it's like you're pushing this bone. So it's apart and into your lower back. So you do that nice and easy for about, I don't know, 10 seconds, maybe 15. And then you push your knuckles together and try to rotate off your lower back, once again for about 10, maybe 15 seconds. And so this is stuff you could do in between bench. I mean, you could very easily, since you're keeping it low level, maybe do like 3 or 4 sets. So like you do a set of bench, whatever, remember, whatever is your pain-free range, do a set of those isometrics, and then go back to your bench, do a set of isometrics, 2, 3, 4 sets, and you're gonna be exactly where you wanna get to. And like, it's just a nice, simple, easy little drill. So this is kind of like a small piece of what we go over in our Healthy Shoulders 10-day challenge. Now, this, remember, like I said, it's a very small piece. This is just a simple drill. This is good, but it's not the complete package. So you guys are going to get my sticky shoulder solution to relieve that pain so you guys can save your shoulders and to continue to crush bench day. So go to healthy-shoulders.com to learn more. Hope you guys have an awesome day, and let's go take care of those shoulders. Have a good one, guys.